Hi, my name is James Andrella, and you are listening to the Back to Human podcast. I'm very excited about today's episode. It may actually be my favorite subject because it has completely transformed my life, and it is something that is readily available to everyone at very little to no cost at all. Out of all the biohacking tools that I've used, the number one thing that I would recommend to absolutely everyone would be to get grounded. On the show with me today, I have the CEO of Earth Effects and also the author of Earthing, the most important health discovery ever, which I completely agree with. If you have not read that book, I highly recommend that you add it to your library ASAP. And I would also suggest watching the Earthing movie. As I said before, this is something that has truly changed not only my life, but my family's life as well. And I am more than positive that it will help you on your health journey. So without further ado, I would like to introduce Clint Ober. Clint, welcome to the show.
Thanks, James. Thanks for having me on.
No, of course, man. Thank you so much.
Look forward to visiting and sharing and answering any questions you have.
Any question.
Yeah.
I get pretty creative, so I don't know if you want to take that back now.
But, no.
So I've read your book, and I have a little bit of a background or idea of your background. So would you mind introducing the audience into how exactly you got associated with grounding? What was your introduction?
Well, grounding is it's a little bit of a story how it came about, but I spent 30 years in the communications industry, cable television, low power television, satellite, microwave, anything. But in that industry, everything has to be grounded to the earth in order to maintain electrical stability. And when I use that term, it means if there's any charge, like static electricity in the environment, or, wind is blowing on the lines and it'll create static voltages. And so by grounding the cable system or to the earth, then any noise that's on the line from the atmospheric electrical noise, then it automatically instantly grounds it to earth. And so you don't see sparkles in your pictures. And so you have nice, clean sound, data, audio. And then when you run anything into the home from an aerial system, whether it's telephone, cable television, whatever, you have to ground that wire at the point where it enters the home, means you have to cut the wire, tie it into a ground block, and then tie it to a ground rod, and then the center conductor of the cable can go on in a jack. It can go on into the home. But the whole idea there is if there's any atmospheric energy, then it'll be grounded to the earth and it won't go into the home. Otherwise, it can go on and blow up your TV set or cause a fire. Primarily, fire is the biggest concern to prevent fire. And that's relevant to our conversation today. And but anyhow, I have a working background. I fully, for 30 years, second nature. You ground everything. If there's noise, ground it more. More ground is the answer for everything electrical. And so anyhow, I spent 30 some years in that industry, and I retired when I was about 50. I'm now 78. I'll be 79 here shortly. And so anyhow, after I retired, I had a medical event where I went to get my some dental work done, and they put in a root canal, and I ended up getting an abscess into my liver, of all things. It's crazy. And anyhow, I kept going to the doc for about a month trying to figure out what it was. They couldn't figure out what it was. And I was in Denver, Colorado at the time, and in the cable television industry, and they just every week I'd go for a new test. They wanted to get more tests because they couldn't figure out what it was. And then about a month later, I was getting really sick and I really couldn't function. So I ended up in the emergency room, Swedish Medical Center in Denver, and I was turning yellow, and I lost my, just everything. Nothing was working. I was really going downhill fast. And anyhow, so they put me in a CAT scan, and took a picture, and they found out that I had an abscess in my liver, and then they cultured it, and then they asked, well, have you been bitten lately? And I said, no. And they said, have you had any dental work? And I said, yes, because the bacteria was related to bacteria you would have in the mouth, I guess. So anyhow, the next morning they came in and said, well, we have some good news and some bad news. The good news is we know what the problem, or we know what's causing the problem. And they had me on every IV known to man at that time. And they said the bad news is your liver is significantly damaged, and there's no guarantee how much time you have left. You're young enough to get a new liver, but you may not have time. And I said, wow, that's really great news. What am I supposed to do with that? I was 50 years old, king of the mountain in Denver, doing well in the cable industry. Life was good. I had mountains of, everything toys, everything you could think of. But anyhow, so that just kind of, shocked me pretty good. So I ended up going home. They sent me home a couple of days later, and they said, go home and get your stuff together. And so I did. And a couple of days later, a young surgeon from Swedish Medical called and said, we'd like to do some experimental surgery. So they went in and cut out about 5/6 of my liver. I guess you have like 6 little recession pockets, your liver, as it expanded through over time. And so, but then they saved the one that was connected to the main artery, and then nursed me back to health. And it took me quite a while to be able to walk, for a few, just even a short period. But within 90 days, my liver grew back to its original size, which was not something they really knew, how much liver they could take out and have it come back. And so that was remarkable. And I could, all kinds of stories went along with that. But anyhow, how I got it took me about 6 months or so to walk a mile. And how I did that is I envisioned there was this 7-Eleven store about a mile away, and they had hot coffee and those nice glazed donuts. And so my goal was I wanted to get to that store so I could buy one. Within 6 months, I was able to do that. I wasn't able to walk back home that day, but anyhow, so it's, it's funny what you can do when you put your mind to it. But anyhow, so during that process, how I got to grounding, first of all, I have a working knowledge of grounding. Everything in my world is about being grounded. The whole world now grounding is a major thing, especially with all the communications and all of the electrical and everything that we have in our living environments. So it's important to maintain good ground. So as I recovered from that event, one day I was in my living room or in my bedroom, and I just woke up and I looked outdoors and I saw that everything was vibrant. This blue, and the sky was more vibrant. The pine needles were, they were like vibrating green. And I thought maybe I was hallucinating from one of the drugs or something. But anyhow, a little bit later, then I realized that I had this kind of an epiphany where, I had for years and years and years, I gathered stuff. I loved to collect art. I was a cowboy from Montana, and I loved Western art. And so I had a 5,000 square foot 2-bedroom home in order to house this art and the other things that I had collected. But as I was laying there that morning, I realized that, I almost died, and what would have happened to everything that I had collected in my life and all the wonderful things that I had done. And so all of a sudden, I just kind of had this epiphany where I said, I never owned any of this stuff. I said it owned me because I went and I bought it and I took it home and I housed it and I took care of it and I did all these things. So all these things I ever purchased in my life, they owned me. They owned my soul because my whole life was about taking care of them and collecting more. But when you die, it comes to your mind, well, what would have happened to everything, who I was, what I've done, and nothing, So I called my children. I said, I want you to come and take whatever in this house you guys would have taken had I died. And if you don't, I'm going to give it away, which I did. And I left Evergreen in a small motorhome, took 2.5 suitcases of clothing. And to this day, I really personally don't own much more than 2.5 suitcases of personal belongings. But anyhow, I just didn't, and I developed an aversion to owning things. And in that process, so I was going through this, and the reason I bought a motorhome because I wanted to get back to nature. I wanted to get back to the earth. I wanted to get back to where I came from. I grew up as a cowboy in Montana. That's just a kid sitting on a horse, riding the pasture, checking the cows out and making sure they're all okay. If they're not, get them out of the herd and find out what's going on in the pasture that made them sick. So I also developed. I had this background of prevention back in the early 50s when, I was born in 44, but in the early 50s, everything was about prevention. An apple a day, keep the doctor away. You couldn't afford to go to the doctors.
Yeah.
You couldn't afford all this stuff. So health was something that we paid attention to, especially eating. But everything we grew everything we ate, or we raised animals. We had gardens. We had everything. We canned things. So very seldom we'd go to the grocery store and get, canned salmon or condensed milk or things that you needed for cooking. But by and large, most of our food was homegrown. And I just took that for granted. I didn't know any better. I mean, I thought we were just poor. And so anyhow, I have that prevention mindset. And it's from being around animals and taking care of animals, because you want to know if they're sick, what caused it, because you got to fix it immediately. Because if the herd gets sick, you call the vet, you call the bank at the same time and throw them the keys, because you're not going to make any money. So anyhow, and that's part of my nature, part of my background. And no matter what, even raising children, when they would get sick, I said, what have you been doing? What did you do? Something caused this. You don't just get sick, because health is natural. That's our most natural. Health is our most natural state. And so anyhow, I have that working background, and then I have the grounding, and then I had this period of a few years where I just sat and did nothing except kind of sit in nature. Traveled from RV park to mostly national parks, and go spend 2 weeks or a week, whatever they let you stay in each location, and just traveled around the country, just kind of getting back in tune. And I was down in Key Largo, Florida, on the Bayside. And so every night I had the RV was parked right up against the bay, so you could sit there and watch the sunset every night. Awesome. And then the manatees would come up and you could water them and everything. So, but you're in the Keys, you're in nature, you're in the water, you're in nature. And so anyhow, one night I was there and I kind of had this feeling that I needed to do something, but I wasn't sure. But anyhow, that night I had this. It came to my mind, and I wrote it down on a piece of paper. It said, become an opposite charge. And I don't know where it came from. It just came out of the ether. Mm-hmm. And so that night I went in the RV and I wrote it down on a piece of paper. I still have it all these years later, 25 years later. And then I also wrote down status quo is the enemy. Had no idea what that meant. For me, become an opposite charge for me, go stir them up, get them excited, get everybody moving. And become an opposite charge, I just didn't have an idea. So those were the spark. That was the spark. So anyhow, I had this urge, and I had to go back west. So I packed everything up, drove up to Fort Lauderdale to see my daughter for a little bit, and then I headed west to LA. And I'm a Montana person, so but anyway, I went to LA, and I decided I can't be here. There's too much craziness. So then I went to Tucson, liked it there, but it wasn't right. Phoenix, and then I said no. So I remember I'd been through Flagstaff, and it's kind of like Montana. It's snow and cold and ski hill, and kind of something I'm familiar with. I just wanted to be home for some reason. So anyhow, I drove up, headed up there that night, and on the way up, it was getting late, and I was tired. So I saw a little sign that said RV park, and it had a name, Sedona, Arizona. So I said, well, heck, I'm just going to go pull in there for the night, and I'll go up to Flagstaff in the morning. Well, that night, so I just pulled in, parked down by Chillicothe across from Oak Creek, down on a really beautiful little spot. But I couldn't see it at night. But anyhow, I woke up in the morning, I opened the door, and I looked out there, and I said, I'm not leaving here. This is like living in a national park. And so I spent 2 years there. And while I was there, and this is what gets to the grounding. I mean, if you ask that question, you kind of need to know how it came about.
Yeah.
So anyhow, I was sitting there, and not a lot to do, but I knew a lot about art. And so I would spend time going out and seeing the galleries, and down there, the galleries, you have to have baseball caps in order to see the art, because they have so many light bulbs, in the galleries. So anyhow, I knew a lot about lighting, but I didn't want to say anything. But anyhow, eventually there was a famous artist coming to town, and I said, "You've got to." I went to the gallery, and I said, "I can help here. I know," and I kind of told him my background. I said, I can help, but you need to have special lighting for this. And so there was like 12 pieces of art. And I said, and they had like 300 or 400 pieces of art in that whole gallery, and 300 or 400 light bulbs. And I says, if you trust me and just let me, I'll come in and I will make this show something that you'll always remember the rest of your life. And so anyhow, the owner didn't want to do it. I mean, the lady didn't, but the husband finally said, well, let him try it. So they left, and I went in and I took down every light bulb in the building. I took down all the art, stacked it all away. And then they brought in the art for the show. And so they bring in each piece, and then I would light each piece individually so that you couldn't see the source of the light. So when you walked in, all you saw was this painting, and it wasn't overlit or anything. It was just, like the artist kind of intended you to see it. And so anyhow, afterwards, the owners came in, and the lady actually broke down in tears. She said, "This is the most beautiful thing I've ever seen." And I said, "Thank you." And so I just kind of bowed out of it after that, other than I knew the artist and so on. And so anyhow, after that, everybody in town that was in the art business came to that event because of the artist that was there. And everybody said, wow, who did your lighting? How did you do this? And then all of a sudden, so I ended up within a few weeks creating a little company called Best of Show. It's still an operating company in Sedona. And but anyhow, so I went around and I lit all the galleries. Now I'd go down to Scottsdale, up to Tahoe or whatever. So I just ended up lighting galleries. These people didn't have a lot of excess money, so there was no. If you didn't do it for money, you did it because you loved art. And but anyhow, while I was doing that, I was starting to work with electrical again. And so one day I was sitting at the computer trying to order some parts from some lighting parts and from the wholesale house down in Phoenix. And every time I hit the computer, then all of a sudden it would crash, and I'd have to reboot it and bring it back up. And this kept going on and on. And then finally I realized, well, it's static electricity. So I took a piece of copper tape and I laid it across the top of my desk and just taped it down. And then I connected it to a little wire. I connected the wire to the electrical ground. And so whenever I would get ready to touch the computer, I'd touch the tape first and discharge the static on my body, and then go about doing whatever I wanted, and it worked. And so I thought, wow, that's great. And then but hey, I put put in my orders and stuff, whatever. But a little while later, I went outdoors and I sat on a bench, and up pulls this big old tour bus. And the people started coming off the tour bus, and they were a Japanese tour group, and so they were a little shorter in stature than most people, and they all had these big white tennis shoes on, and it just became it was like out of nowhere. I just asked myself, I wonder if there's any consequence to humans wearing these rubber-soled shoes, because we're no longer naturally grounded. Now, unless you spent 30 years in the communication industry and knew that your body was conductive and knew certain things, you could never have asked that question. But anyhow, I was away from the cable industry then. And it was that working knowledge that made me ask the question. And I didn't know. So that night I went home, and I took a voltmeter and connected it to a ground and walked around my house, and I just held the test probe, and I started measuring all of the charges that are on my body when I walk through the house. Static electricity. Every step you take, you're creating static electricity on your body. And then you have all these EMFs, then you have all of these wiring in your homes. You have all of this electrical noise around us. In nature, there's none. In your house, it's like you're living in a sea of electrical noise. And I never thought about it before, because we were always grounding everything else to protect it from electromagnetic interference. And here, the human body is the most electrical thing in the environment, but never thought about grounding the body. So anyhow, I then went back to the hardware store and bought a roll of 3-inch wide metal duct tape, the aluminum type. And I pasted it across the bed on a sheet, and I connected it to a ground wire, threw it out the window, connected it to a ground rod, and grounded. So I knew that the tape was grounded to the earth. So then I took a meter and grounded it, and then I would go lay on the bed. As soon as I laid on the tape, then all this noise would go away. It would stop, because when you are connected to the earth, you're electrically as big as the earth, and the earth is infinitely large, body is infinitely small. So if the earth is ground, whatever you touch it, you're going to be ground. So anyhow, I didn't think too much about it, but and again, I was in my early 50s, and I had lots of pain because I was a cowboy. I had skied for 30 years. I had every kind of injury you could possibly have. But anyhow, and I remember one time I went out the back door, and I had so much pain in my eyes. I looked up at the sky and I said, God, why'd you make my body with so much pain in it? And this is all about the same time, And so all of this kind of just came together. But anyhow, that night, I laid down on that tape, and I had the meter on my chest, and I was playing with it, just playing with the meter. And then the next thing I knew, it was morning, and the meter's down by my side. And I thought, wow, there's something going on here, because normally I don't sleep. I'd have to take Advil or, whatever, and watch TV half the night because I couldn't sleep. But anyhow, that night I just fell right to sleep. And I woke up the next morning, and I thought, wow, there's something going on. And so I got up and thought about it a little bit. Did it again for a couple of nights, same thing. And then I grounded a couple of friends that I had met in Sedona. And I said, you guys need to try this, because you're not going to believe it. Nobody sleeps. Hardly anybody anywhere in the United States sleeps. If they do, I'd like to meet them. But anyhow, so I went and grounded these two guys. They were older, like me, in their late 40s, early 50s. And one of them had severe arthritis in his hands. And so they both went along with it, because in a small town, there's not much to do. Somebody's got an idea to entertain you. That's what you do. So anyhow, a couple days later, one of the guys comes over and he says, He said, it really does work. He says, but do you think it do you think it can be affecting my arthritis? I says, no, I don't think so. I think it just helps you sleep. And then I realized that all my chronic pain was significantly reduced.
Mm.
And that's when I realized, okay, how come I don't know about this?
Mm.
And all we had back then was AOL for internet. And then getting on the internet, there was, whatever. So I couldn't find anything on the internet because there just wasn't anything there. And then, so I went to LexIs and the data retrieval groups to see if I could find any published literature on why grounding makes you sleep better, why grounding makes pain go away. And I looked, couldn't find anything. And so I ended up going down to University of Arizona and visiting with a couple of people there and tried to find some information there. There was nothing in the literature, nothing anywhere that said, well, take your shoes off, stick your feet on the earth, and the pain's going to go away. There was nothing anywhere. Now, later, after we published the book and so on, there were people sent us articles and books from 100 years ago and from indigenous cultures. So it is quite common, but we had forgotten about it for 100 years or more. And nobody recognized why it worked. They just knew that,
It did.
It did. And so anyhow, then, so that's kind of how I got to grounding. Now I can go on. And you can ask me questions anywhere along the way here, but anyhow, so I ended up not being able to figure it out. I wasn't tied to Sedona. I didn't want to leave, but I wasn't tied to it. So I said, I'm going to go out to California. I'm going to go to UCLA and ask them, because those guys are smart. They know everything. Mm-hmm. If they don't, they'll figure it out for you. And so I went out there and I ended up making a connection with somebody in a sleep lab. And they said, and I was telling them what I was doing, and they looked at me and they said, you expect us to believe that somebody's going to tie a wire around somebody's toe, stick a nail in the ground, tie the wire to it, and that's going to make them sleep better? They said, get out of here. You're nuts. Go away. And anyhow, we were able to carry on a conversation after that. And I did learn that I knew nothing about biology, and they knew very little about electrical. And most of all, nobody knew their body was electrical. Nobody thinks that way. And but to me, you can't move you're electrical first, chemical second, because you can't make chemical unless you move electrons. So everything's electrical first, chemical second. And but I knew this, but I didn't understand any of it. So anyhow, that set me on a course where I had to do the first study. And I was out in California, so I went up to Ventura, where I just wanted to be far enough away from LA that I had some breathing room. But I went up there and I ended up doing a study, and with the help of a couple of students that knew how to do studies. So we grounded 60 people. 30 of them were truly grounded, 30 of them were not grounded, and the control group. And then all we were trying to ask is if they slept better and if they had less pain. And we came back and overwhelmingly everybody who was grounded had less pain and slept better and had, in general, improved health. And then we had these little things show up, like people who had TMJ, the TMJ would go away, or the young girls that had menstrual cramps and stuff. Well, I have one gal she said that for at least a week a month, she could not go to work because of the
cramps, pain.
Yeah, the cramps and pain she was having. And she said when we grounded her, she went to work and nothing ever happened. She said it was a miracle. And so there was things like that. And then, just it went on. And so we were kind of dumbfounded. How could this simple thing have this effect? Mm-hmm. We did not know. But we had gathered more anecdotal information so we could go to doctors or scientists or whatever and say, here, you tell us what's going on here. And so we ended up connecting with a radiologist who had just retired down in San Diego. and he was looking for something to do. And his name was Maurice Golly. And told him what we were doing. He says, I don't think there's anything to what you're doing, but he said, let's do some tests and find out, or let's do a study and find out. So we went and grounded, a dozen people, most of them women, and we measured cortisol. We would have them chew cortisol, saliva type of things, and then we would every 4 hours for 24 hours. So we had a profile of their circadian cortisol profile, and then we'd freeze them and send them to the lab. And then 6-8 weeks later, we went back, did the same thing, had them chew the saliva, and we also measured heart rate variability. But back then, nobody knew what that was or how to deal with it. So anyhow, we sent all this saliva in, and then they sent the data back to us. And so I put them in a profile chart, and what we found is before everybody's 24-hour cortisol secretion profiles were all over the place. They were just scattered. They looked like spaghetti compared to each other. But after they were grounded for 6 to 8 weeks, then they all synchronized into a tight band. The young girls who were high anxiety, where they came down. The older people who had exhausted adrenals, theirs came up. And we thought, wow, there's something really odd here, because when we grounded them to the earth, we saw this spike in cortisol at 4 a.m. West Coast time. And interestingly enough, there were 3 stewardesses that we had to take out of the study because they were stationed or whatever in San Diego, so they were there 3 or 4 days a week. And the reason we took them out is because their cortisol profiles were 3 hours off from everyone else, but they lived in New York. So that explained that. But what we couldn't understand was why cortisol spiked at 4 a.m. at night. I mean, a huge spike. And then I started studying it then, and cortisol does do that. It has to do it because that's what gives you the energy to get out of bed in the morning without having a heart attack. If you have low cortisol, you're not going to have any energy. So why at 4 o'clock? Because there's no daylight, there's no sound, there's nothing in the environment that's cueing that, triggering that hormonal release. So then I did more work, and I realized that the Earth itself has, this global
rhythm.
Rhythms, but it's a rise and fall in amplitude of Earth's electric field. Means it's stronger at noon and it's lowest at midnight. And then as the Earth turns and you're connected to it, and the sun is stationary, and as the Earth turns, and so when you come around a little bit, then all of a sudden the sunlight side, I mean, there's rhythms, there's noise. It's like the ocean and everything else. All this stuff is noise. But as you get closer or further away from, it's like lightning at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. There's more lightning strikes at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Wherever it's 2 o'clock in the afternoon in the equatorial regions. So the sun, heats causes evaporation, then you have condensation, and then you have at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, no matter where you are on the planet, there's lightning and thunderstorms. So anyhow, there's these rhythms out there. There's all these patterns and everything. And so then we finally tied it down to that the only thing that could be causing this is the beginning of the rise in the amplitude of Earth's electric field at 4 a.m. So this is coming from the Earth. So this is a grounding phenomena. So if you're flying across the nation and like you're flying to New York or whatever, and you get up in the morning and you feel like you have acid in your veins, that's really cortisol, because your cortisol is 3 hours off. Mm-hmm. So if you want to resync your cortisol, just stand on the earth barefoot for 15 minutes and it resets your circadian profile. And then you sync up with the earth wherever you are. Mm-hmm. And anyhow, so we've learned all these things. And anyhow, that study, everyone was really surprised when the results came in, because how could this possibly be? How come nobody knew about any of this? And I didn't know anything. I was just a cowboy trying to figure it out, you know. And so anyhow, they said, well, everybody got excited and said, well, let's do a bigger study. And then all of a sudden, other people started to get involved, scientists from all over and other researchers. And then all of a sudden, everybody's doing studies everywhere. And we ended up with, like 30 peer-reviewed published studies, at least that many on the Earthing Institute site now. And and then we have at least that many going on around the world, even now, because everybody's just, after 25 years, people are slowly starting to take an interest in it, slowly hearing about it. And it's happening. Yeah. So anyhow, so for the last 30 years, or the last 25 years, what I've done primarily is to promote the studies, engage the scientific community wherever, however necessary. Fortunately, I had a fistful of dollars because I did all right in the cable industry. And because nobody does anything without, the only reason people do research is to get paid. They don't do research because they love it. They don't have, some people may, but the only reason people do anything is so they get paid. And so that was, in order to do all the research we did, it had to be paid for. And the universities get a certain amount of money, the researchers get a certain amount of money, and it goes on and on. And so that's a business all by itself. That's why they never come to a conclusion. They just say we need further study. So they give more grants to do more study. And it's okay, it's good, So, but anyhow, so I have spent the last 25 years doing nothing except promoting the science and spreading the word. And I do that. It's like I used to go to, I don't know if you remember David Wolf. Have you ever heard that name, David Wolf?
I have heard.
Maybe. Yeah, David, they had a group called Longevity something, and he found out about what we were doing, and he was blown away with it. This is back, gosh, in 2010, 2008, somewhere back in there, even before, and he just fell in love with it. So they started having these events, a couple of them a year. And so I would go to these events, and the first one had like a few hundred people. The last one I did had like 1,500 people. And then we would run a ground wire across the floor and then tape it down so it's kind of hidden. And then we would have a little coil cord beside each chair, and then we'd put a patch, on it, or a mat that they could sit on or whatever, so that everybody that was in attendance at those conferences for 3 days, they could experience grounding. And it was so successful that no matter what we took to the shows, it was sold out just within a few minutes of David or somebody talking about grounding. And then afterwards, they would generate, a few $1 million worth of sales in grounding products because of the people who attended the seminar. They would go home and then they would give it to their moms or whatever, then they'd want to buy more. So it kind of created, so it's been primarily the business evolved around women, primarily the ages 30 to 55. The older, they had more disposable income, the kids were gone. The younger ones were moms who were autoimmune disease that really needed help. And so we're still a 99% female business. It's amazing, but it's true. Because women take care of the health of the family, And so that makes sense. But anyhow, the business, I never got in the business to sell product. I just wanted to answer the question, is there a consequence here? But as we did our studies, the more we did our studies, the more people that we grounded, they started to experience the benefits or the results. And then they would want to take the test mats that we had used with them. Some of them were bed mats, some of them were pads, some of them were just patches and so on. But they all wanted to take them home after the studies And then they kept coming back asking for more for their moms, primarily their moms. My mom needs this, or somebody needs one. And we didn't really have products. So we ended up there. The demand automatically forced us into the business.
Yeah.
Because nobody else could do it. Nobody else would do it. Everybody, we went to manufacturers. They thought, you guys are crazy. Get out of here. Just like the UCLA. Nobody wanted to touch it because nobody could believe it.
Mhm.
And the only time you can believe it is if you experienced it.
Absolutely.
And so that's still pretty much the way it is today. So I spend my life doing podcasts. I do at least 3 a week. And I do events. Right now we're installing or taking grounding to the yoga industry, and so we go in and we have a special tape we put on the floor, and so there's no wires and stuff, and then the mats are conductive, so anybody that is on the mat, they're automatically grounded to the earth.
Mhm.
Well, that's where yoga came from. Is they used to do it in the dirt on the earth,
That would be
and they
the
never had mats in the beginnings. But anyhow, so everything I do, and I've just dedicated my life to it, is in fact, I go into shock if I don't get to go ground somebody every day. Who do I get to ground today, or whatever, or what group, or whatever? And so, but it's all about every time you ground a person, you never know where it's going to go. I mean, we have grounded some of the most famous people in the world. We have done so many things, and it spreads around. We've grounded hundreds and hundreds of athletes, but they don't talk about it. The athletes, this is a secret weapon. And but anyhow, so did I answer your question, how I came about it?
No, absolutely. That is the story. And I
Yeah.
absolutely love how it kind of came together and you had this whole epiphany. And there's just so much that you touched on that I want to kind of go back, and now I'll dive into the questions. But I think
You,
the
yeah,
background, the overall summary of what earthing is, and now that there's actual proof because there's science and there's literature
yeah,
to back the anecdotal claims, which I think if enough people are saying that, hey, this stuff works, then we need to pay attention to that, even if there is not money behind it or there's not money to be made.
right.
Because, as you stated, yeah, people are not going to do research unless there's money involved. And
True.
this is potentially, I mean, it's available to everyone. All you have to do is, like you said, get barefoot and put your feet to the ground, and it's free medicine.
Yes.
Yep.
Yep.
And I love how you were an art fan, an art fanatic, and how you did
Yep.
that. I say that it's very hard to see the bigger picture when you're actually in it. So we have these art paintings, these canvases, and honestly, what you have to do is step back sometimes. That way you can actually see what we're missing and
Yep.
how the grounding didn't really come to you until you stepped out of the communications.
Yep.
So, and then now all of a sudden it's very obvious. And then the footwear. So I do all of my training in barefoot style shoes. I consider modern day name brand footwear almost weapons in and of themselves, how they cut off circulation, how they restrict the foot. And it's almost like a little foot coffin. I think it kind of keeps us locked into this sympathetic state. And obviously it's keeping us ungrounded. So who knows what we're being affected by. That'll be a whole nother podcast just on footwear alone. But I think one of the most effective things that people can do is realize that, hey, when you are wearing those marshmallow cushiony shoes that are have rubber soles on the bottom, you are no longer connected to the earth, and you'll plug in your phone, you'll plug in your laptop, your television, whatever it may be. But we are electrical beings, and the one thing that's not being charged up anymore is you.
That's right.
I believe Nikola Tesla actually mentioned that he viewed the body as a meat machine. So we are electrical beings, and we have these electrons that we can pick up from the earth. You have the opposite charge, as you stated. So
Yeah.
there's just so much that we can kind of go into here, and electrical more ground. So what is happening when people are getting grounded? Is it improving their circulation? Is it, I mean, from what I've read, it improves the circulation, blood flows better. I realized that when I would work with athletes out at the beach, or even out at some hills that are nearby. I'm in South Florida near the Fort Lauderdale area.
Right.
I would actually have them sprint barefoot, and
Mm-hmm.
they were much more efficient when they were training grounded, as opposed to when I brought them into the gym with poor lighting and non-conductive floor mats in their rubber-soled shoes. So there's a lot to this. So what is the main thing that you think is working with grounding?
Okay, well, it starts with the sun. You know, the earth is charged by the sun. The sun is radiating the earth, meaning spewing photons and electrons. And so the earth stores this energy. And so the earth is kind of like a battery. It has a, 20 to 300 millivolt negative charge. Negative means an abundance of electrons that are free that can rapidly move, and they only do one thing: reduce charge. Like in a lightning strike, for instance, is where you visually see it. There's a shortage of electrons at the bottom of the cloud because the electrons from the, I don't want to get too technical, but so anyhow, but once the imbalance gets out of large enough, then there's a fissure in the plasma and it'll crack the plasma, and then electrons will flow from the earth to the clouds and reduce the charge, the charge imbalance, and then everything returns to normal. So the earth is electrical by nature. Everything that is on the earth that is alive is because of these electrons that come from the sun that migrate on the earth. All of our plants are energetically grown with, this energy, and we eat the plants and stuff. So we kind of are the earth walking around. So, but anyhow, so the earth has this charge. So your human body is conductive, and so if you take your shoes off and stand barefoot on the earth, then your body will equalize and absorb sufficient electrons from the earth until you're equal in the same potential, meaning you have the same amount of electrons per inch as the earth itself does, something like that. But as soon as you take your feet, put your shoes on, then you cut that off. It stops, instantly stops. Now the body is a living thing. So and you're breathing oxygen. So there's all of this energy at the speed of light goes in and out of the body just to maintain earth potential. But I don't want to get into too technical on that. But so anyhow, from the beginning of time, we always lived on the earth. We slept on the earth. So we didn't have to know about grounding. Nobody ever thought about it because we were always grounded. All living things on the planet. If you unground them, they're going to die. Like a lot of plants. I mean, rooted type plants, they will die. Anyhow, so it's this electrical energy that is, it's the force. It's the force. It's the thing that it's like when you die, when your electrons start moving, they can no longer get, brain waves or heart or whatever. You're dead. That means the electrons stopped. The electricity stopped. So it's all about electrical. So anyhow, so when we touch the earth, our body becomes negative, meaning you have an abundance of free electrons. And what that means to anybody in the communications industry means you can't have charge in a grounded object. You can't have inflammation. Inflammation is charge. Body on fire, inflame, body inflame. Fire is oxidation, that's charge. But you can't have inflammation, chronic inflammation in a grounded object. And that's where one of the studies eventually led me, was once I understood that neutrophils the white blood cells. If you have a pathogen in your body, the white blood cells, they will swim over and encapsulate, wrap themselves around that pathogen or whatever, and then they release reactive oxygen species. The word reactive means it's electrically charged. It has such a charge on it that it can rip an electron away from a pathogen and destroy it. That's bizarre, but anyhow, that's how the immune system works. So anyhow, throughout all time, we always were grounded to the earth. We always had an excess negative charge on our body, so that if a neutrophil went over and oxidized something and there were some remaining radicals left over after the oxidative burst, then the earth free electrons would neutralize it at the speed of light rather than allowing it to go over and steal, because the inflammation is when you have a shortage of these electrons in your body. You don't have enough free electrons in your body. And what happens is you have an oxidative burst, and the remaining reactive oxygen or free radicals that are left over after that burst, if they're going to ground in just a few nanoseconds. So if there's not a negative or free electron to reduce that radical, then it's going to steal an electron from some adjacent tissue. Mm-hmm. And that's what they call fire, because it steals one and then it damages that cell, and the immune system sends another one. So you have a chronic event going on. You started a fire, you started an oxidative fire, and it won't go out until you have enough free electrons in your body to reduce it and prevent it. Now you can eat blueberries, you can do a lot of things, but you need a whole lot of these, because in nature, you're grounded 24/7. We couldn't have gotten here as a species. If we couldn't have evolved if we weren't grounded, because grounding is what protects the living environment of all cells. Is these free electrons they're grounding, they're mopping up, they're preventing charge from oxidizing tissue, plants, humans, whatever.
I like the way that you put that, because if you look at the nervous system of the body and you look at a tree, they kind of share a very striking resemblance. So the way that I kind of picture humans is like as if we're walking trees. So we've been literally uprooted, and the inflammation, and actually going back even farther, what you were saying, how you wanted to get back to nature, like there was something that you just wanted to feel at home. That's the exact reason why I named this the Back to Human podcast, because I feel like we've had something, but we've kind of been distracted from it. And it's time that we kind of go back to our true human selves, where we're doing things that are very not human-like. So I love the example that you were saying there, the information. It's almost like a fire spreading, and then the electrons that we can receive from the earth would be as if we're putting out the fire with the water that we're receiving.
All of our studies showed, is when pain resolves, then that was our mission for 8 years, how to try to figure out what's the mechanism of grounding. How does it work? How does it do this? And to me, it was quite simple. Ground is like water. So you're opening up the skin and pouring electrons in there, and it's in there reducing these, putting out the fire of inflammation. And it's just common sense, second nature to anybody that's electrical.
Maybe that's all we need to know, is that human beings are electrical. So go charge us. And it's now that I'm talking with you, it's funny because, again, we have these portable devices that we need to replug into the wall. It's almost as if the footwear has made us portable.
Right. Well, before footwear, I grew up barefoot. The only time we wore shoes was when we went to church or school or some event. And then if it rained, you had to take them off and carry them so they didn't get wet and they get all gnarly. But it was in the late 50s we invented plastics. In the early 60s, the first thing we did was make rubber sole shoes. And that's when this event really took off. If you go out and if you go back and look at the growth of diabetes, autism, lupus, MS, cardiovascular, all of cancer, all of these, they're all on a curve that's exponentially growing. And it's still growing to this day. They don't know why. We have all these medical institutions, kind of, it's palliative care, take care of you until you die, make you feel better. But the cause, nobody understands the cause. There's 100 causes of inflammation, but there's one primary cause, is what we learned. What we learned in all of our work. We've just stepped out of nature. And when we put those shoes on, we disconnect ourselves from the earth. You don't only disconnect yourself from the electrons in the physical, earth, you disconnect from that energy, because all things that are connected to the earth, all living things, it's kind of like we're all one. It's kind of like there's this energy that we're all a piece of and a part of, and this synchronicity of events and all this stuff that goes on. But it's through this global communication. All things that are connected to the earth are connected to this global communication system. You put shoes on, it's like you're an astronaut. You might as well be out in space. You cut yourself off from the soul of the earth.
I think it's funny how the sole of the shoe is literally called a soul. I do agree with you. We're kind of cutting off our soul connection to what was, what is, and what's there. And
Yes.
That's probably the reason why you get a little bit stressed out or triggered if you don't have a day where you can go ground someone, because you're trying to get your friends back.
Yeah, it's kind of like, it's so important, especially to ground these young moms who have children, and to help them get their life back so they can pass it on. That's where I prefer to spend my time. The older people are going to get grounded one way or the other soon enough. But it's like we've got to stop this nonsense. We have to get back to nature. We are nature. We're a part of it. We're not separate from it. And we're paying the price.
Well, I think you'd be proud because I'm carrying on your life's work then. I just had a son, and my partner, the very first time that she ever laid on the grounding mat, it was like she laid back into a cloud. She felt it instantly, so she's very intuitive, so I'm sure she picked up on it. But no, I totally agree, and this is some life-changing stuff that you're creating. Now, what I've noticed, because I've introduced this to my family, I noticed that the very first time that I ever laid on a grounding sheet, I started to get kind of congested. And then I decided, okay, I'm going to get off this for a little bit. Went away. The congestion went away. But then as soon as I got back on it, the congestion came back. So what I attributed to is, okay, maybe I had some fire in my body that now the electrons that I was receiving from the earth are finally, or the neutrophils, are finally able to go do their job. They're taking care of the fire. And then I've noticed with my family, some people would get tingles, like a diabetic neuropathy. They get some type of tingles the very first few nights, and then it would okay to go away. Their pain's gone. They have more mobility. My mom can literally put her leg up almost over her head now, and she's in her 70s as well.
Good.
Actually able to get off of blood pressure medication as well. I mean, this has such a broad range of benefits, and it seems like what we're taking care of is all the same stuff, which would be inflammation. So we have this disease, that disease. I would say we really have one major disease, and that would be being overly oxidized and inflamed on fire.
Yeah, you're absolutely correct. It was 2004 when Ritger and the boys back at Boston, Mass. Came out with that article. It was in Time magazine, and in the front of Time magazine, it showed the body on fire and had the word inflammation. And they said, you don't have cardiovascular disease, you don't have cancer, you don't have all these things. What you have is chronic inflammation, and it manifests differently in different people based on your genetics and your lifestyle. And meaning cardiovascular is going to show up in some people that do certain things, and cancer is going to show up in others, and lupus and whatever. So, but anyhow, if you you have to have inflammation first. Otherwise, you can't have these diseases. These diseases don't come from nature. And this is really important. In the animal world, cancer by and large, does not exist unless man screws up their environment. But animals, for instance, who live indoors with their owners, they manifest same health disorders as their owners, and 50% of them die from cancer, just like their owners. And that doesn't happen in nature. I mean, they're going to die of something, but they're not dying of inflammation-related health disorders or cancer and the like. Degenerative health. It's about quality of life. It's about quality of life. If you're going to live in a pain and your whole life is going to be upside down, low energy, all these things, and all these diseases and stuff. These are environmental health disorders. It's because of the environment we're living in. We insulated ourselves from the earth first, and it's like EMFs and all that kind of stuff. If you are disconnected from the earth, you are an antenna that attracts these EMFs to your body and attracts static electricity. But if you're grounded to the earth, that's impossible. Nothing can affect you when you're connected to the earth. So it's your shield. It's an electrical shield. And so I could go on and on about all of this, but it's really, look at the animal world and you see what we're talking about. Mm-hmm. They have health. Yeah. Health is the body's most natural state. If you do not have health, then something you're doing is interfering with the immune system's ability to maintain health. Because the body, the immune system only knows one thing: return the body to normal. Yeah. That's what it does all day long. Yeah.
And something is getting in its way. Could be.
Yeah.
Yes. A previous episode on animals and how the domesticated animals are pretty much a direct mirror and reflection of what's going on with us. But for whatever reason, people honestly can't see it. It's the strangest thing to me. It's like having a bird's eye view.
Yeah.
But you did mention EMFs, and so if you are grounded with all the towers that are up, I'm not going to mention the name because honestly, some of my stuff gets censored. But I'm sure you know what I'm talking about. But with all these high emitting EMF towers that are surrounding us now, if you're grounded, you're absolutely protected. You wouldn't need like any type of scalar devices or anything that's coming out in order to protect you.
No, what you have to think about nature first of all. It's like, magnets were real popular 20 years ago. Everybody had to have magnets. And I said, the day that I see a baby pop out with a magnet tagged to its butt, that's when I'll start believing that kind of stuff. But anyhow, so everybody is trying to they're out there doing all these things, creating and inventing all these things to protect themselves from EMF. You can't protect yourself from EMF. There's only one way on God's green earth you can protect yourself from EMF. That's put your feet on the earth. There ain't no other way, because these things are pervasive. No matter where you are, 10,000 cell phones signals are hitting you, or if you walk in any house, you're walking into a bird cage of EMF. You take all the wallboard down, look at all the wires in that home. You are totally electrified if you're living in a modern home and you are not grounded. You can measure it with a voltmeter. Anybody can measure it. And that's what the EMF people and all these people are running around measuring it and say, oh my, you got to do this, you got to do that. They don't understand that the problem is not EMFs. The problem is that we're no longer naturally grounded. So what has to occur in order to restore health is you got to fix the problem. Mm-hmm. You can't have a Band-Aid, and you can't afford to have somebody come in and shield your house. It will cost you tens of thousands of dollars. You can't afford to do all this stuff that everybody's talking, and they know just enough to be dangerous. They don't really know what they're doing, most of them, or what they're talking about. And I don't want to pick on anybody, and I don't want to interfere with anybody making a living, because that's what people do. But if and this is cowboy logic. This is taking care of a cow in a pasture. You got to find out what the problem is. What made the cow sick? you can't do it by adding supplements. I mean, there's nothing wrong with supplements. You need them today, but with the cow, I mean, they eat certain things. They drink water. They need fresh water. They need this. They need that. But anything else is going to contribute. You can't mask. You can't take and put salve on a wound and expect it to heal if you haven't fixed what caused it. And so the real cause of all these health disorders is not all of this noise and the fact that you didn't eat enough of this or you didn't drink enough of that or you didn't do whatever. The cause is because you are ungrounded. You are disconnected from the earth. So what's the solution? Well, it's not going to happen overnight. It took us 60 years to create this mess. Only 60 years. In fact, 35 years ago when I started on this, it was only 35 years from the time they invented shoes. I mean, plastic shoes. But now it's 65 years. So in 1960, 90% of the visits to a practitioner were for acute injury, infectious disease, childbirth, 10% whatever. Today, 90% of the visits to a doctor are for an inflammation-related health disorder, a insulated from the earth health disorder. You're living ungrounded. And so the earth can't protect you. So you're out here in free space. You're an astronaut. And astronauts do not do well if they're ungrounded for a long time.
No. Get to the actual problem.
That's, but again, I'm a cowboy logic and black and white. All this other stuff is good. If you can't do anything else, maybe it'll do you some good. But unless you understand the problem and attempt to fix the problem, you can, if EMFs are a problem, turn the damn breakers off. You have no option. You have to do that. It's like taking your shoe up, putting your foot on the earth. Same thing. This doesn't cost a fortune. This just, you have to eliminate the source. But that's not going to stop inflammation. Doing all the EMF stuff is not going to do anything for you for inflammation. The only thing that's going to do that is you have to have some negative charge. You have to get free electrons from somewhere. Nothing else is going to solve that.
Otherwise, you're kind of just like fanning the flames a little bit.
Yes, but again, you can edit this part out if you want. But again, I'm not fond of the people running around scaring everybody, especially guys running out there with voltmeters scaring women. Oh my God, you're going to do this, you're going to do that. They don't want to hear that. What they want, they have pain, they have health problems. They need a solution, something they can afford, something they can identify with. Not give me $1,000 and I'll audit your home and tell you what your problems are. That's not the solution. EMFs are not that's just not the solution.
Gotcha. No, I really appreciate the honesty. So just get grounded. You don't even need something like a Faraday cage. Now, what would so say for instance, if we have dirty electricity and we're grounding something like the grounding sheet into those wall sockets and we sleep on that, does that have any negative effect on our body, or it's just still electrons coming in and doing what they need to do?
There's some published papers on this, and we have published some of our own work on the earthinginstitute.net that talks about so-called dirty electricity and all of these things. I can tell you one thing. I'm 68, pushing 79 years old. And I've been doing this for over 25 years. And I've been around electrical and all this stuff for another 30 years. I've never found anybody that ever died from exposure to dirty electricity or any other of this nonsense. Your body is, you can't just penetrate the skin. I mean, the skin it's a dielectric. I mean, there's just so much that needs to be said about it, but it takes time to educate and whatever. But dirty electricity is your refrigerator kicks on, and so there's a spike, what they call a spike. you can measure this. So you have it, and let's say that you have somebody come in and you spend thousands of dollars on filters and whatever. Well, your next door neighbor, they probably didn't do that. So the spikes from them, I mean, electric fields go from here to infinity. So they lose 50% of their power every time you double the distance. But they're going to go through your house. They're going to go through, so it's just, I don't know how to say this without, I try to avoid it mostly because it's just nonsense. But nobody, these are not making people sick. What's making people sick is they have inflammation in their bodies. They're eating poorly. They're not exercising. They're not, we live in homes today. We no longer get sunlight. We cut off our sunlight, we cut off our ground, and here we are living in this artificial environment, and turn up the noise, turn up the sound, brighten the colors, give me an extra cell phone. And so I don't think about anything except what I see. That's the problem. But if you want health, if we're talking about pure health, then you have to go back to nature. You have to start at nature. You have to go sit on a rock in the woods barefoot and look around. Look at the animals. Look at life. Look at the trees. Look at everything. You have health. If you want that, then you have to return to nature. Now, we're not going to go back and live in the woods. We're not going to do this and that. But you do have to, eventually, they're going to figure it out. And I work on it all the time. We sell unbelievable amounts of these products, and it's all word of mouth. We don't really advertise a lot or anything like that, but it's moms taking care of moms and moms taking care of children. That's the but it spreads like wildfire around the world. We deliver a product around the world, and we have distributors now that, again, it's an accidental business. But the point is, unfortunately, we do make money doing that, and we get to invest more of that money back into what we do, and that's really good, because at my age, I don't need money. I just need to do something worthwhile and feel good about it before I go out. But anyhow, so I don't want to get lost here. EMFs, all these things, environmental EMFs in your home are not your problem. If you want to get rid of them, you can, and I think everybody should get rid of all the noise you possibly can in your environment, but that's not your priority. Your priority is getting grounded as much as you possibly can. And then eventually, and we have billions of dollars of grounded carpet being sold every year for corporate America, for mission critical center, for anything where there's static electricity and blow a computer or something, or damage some chips. But that's a big industry, a huge industry, but the public's not aware of it. It's like electrical. If you go to, you go to your city, the schools are grounded. I mean, they have shielded conduit. All commercial buildings in any city has iron, metal-clad conduit around their electrical wires. There are no electric fields when you have metal-clad conduit. Why don't they have them in home? Well, that's up to the builder and the home buyer. The government doesn't control that. That's up to the builder and the home buyer. Well, the home buyer doesn't want to pay that extra $20,000 to have metal-clad conduit. First of all, they don't even know that they would benefit from it. But so you have to look at all of this. People do know about this, but the public knows nothing.
Yeah.
Just give them more TV, give them more whatever, Yep. Can't even get them to go exercise,
Give them bread and circuses and they'll never revolt.
Yes.
Well,
yeah.
I think you saved me a bit of money then, because I've just been getting grounded, and despite it being plugged into the wall, whether I know if it's dirty electricity or not, I feel great. Nothing has gotten worse, and I feel younger now than I ever have before, so I'm just going to keep doing it.
Yeah, well, dirty electricity is it's pervasive. It's everywhere, and it has been forever. It's like, we have electricity since, the 1800s, and well over 100 years. Surprising we've only had it that long, but anyhow, but people weren't, they were more problematic back in 100 years ago because they weren't well grounded. They weren't a lot of things, but we didn't have this. It was only in the a lot of these people run around and say, well, this is the cause of all these modern illnesses. They're not, because the people in the 1800s didn't have this. The people in the 1900s didn't have these health disorders. Autism didn't start until the 60s and 70s. Diabetes didn't start until the late 50s and so on. So something in the environment changed in the 50s and 60s that caused this, environmental change that promoted these inflammation-related health disorders, because we didn't have those before. And a lot of people, say, well, it's because of electricity. It's not because of electricity. We've always had electricity. It's like some say, well, it was the advent of electricity that caused these. There's no science to prove this. And so there's a lot of mucky muck out there, but so I knew, even as simple as trying to teach people or explain or the effects and the benefits of grounding, I knew you had to put millions and millions and millions of dollars into research and studies before anybody would believe it. And even then, they're not going to believe it unless they're making a buck off of it. So we create these products. We keep the price down as low as we possibly can. Our mission is one thing: get as many people grounded until somebody starts a fire, a groundswell, and it's the moms. 99% of our customers are moms, female.
That's insane. I really did not expect it to be that high, but
oh yeah,
go moms. Powerful.
Yep.
So, now, I believe talking about actually sleeping on it, because that's where I've seen the most benefit. Into the audience, I get maybe 5 or 6 hours of sleep with a newborn baby, but I still feel fresh and like I got 8 to 9, honestly. Do you need to sleep directly on the mat, or does it kind of just provide this field? Because I've heard from other companies before that you should be directly on it, or that you need to be wet in order to go through your sheet in order to be conductive. Is that true at all?
Well, I've been doing this stuff for 25 years, and I've tested every product that ever came along, every product that's out there. 99% of the products being sold, especially on Amazon and around the world, these are knockoff products. They're of products that we discontinued, like the cotton sheets. We quit making those because the sweat would oxidize the silver and they wouldn't last very long. People get mad because they quit working, and you have a 20-30% return rate. So you just can't afford to do that. So we kept improving the products and improving the products and improving the products. And everybody wants a nice soft sheet and a nice fluffy mattress and whatever. So we've always tried to mimic what they already have. And it's been a challenge. It's been a real challenge. So it's about 8 years ago, maybe 10 years ago, I said, okay, enough of this. We're not doing any more silver. We're not doing any more of this stuff. We're going to build something that delivers the results that we see in our studies. If it doesn't do that, we are not going to market it. And so, so I eventually came up with, or developed along with some engineers, the carbon mats. They're black, they're solid black, and they're this, you can buy them the size of your bed, and they just fit over the top of your mattress. And then just lay down and go to sleep. Now, I sleep directly on one. I have forever. But again, I'm 79, and if I don't stay grounded and I go for travel for 3 or 4 days and all that kind of stuff, I start getting the aches and pains. I don't want the aches and pains. I want my nice blood viscosity. I want all that. I want health.
Yeah.
As long as I'm here, I want health. I know I'm not going to be here forever because of entropy, but as long as I'm here, I want to be healthy. And so this keeps me healthy. So now everybody usually said, well, I'm not going to do that. I could never do that. And remind me to tell you what happens to the blood, by the way, because you asked. But most people that buy our products they have autoimmune related health disorder. They have chronic inflammation. And it can be anywhere from lupus to MS to fibromyalgia to, cardiovascular, something significant. Their health, they're in trouble. The average person who has any sense of health, they are not buying our products or grounding themselves. The only people that buy these kind of products and use them and share them and whatever are people who have their bodies are on fire and they've gone to the doctors, and it's like MS and lupus. When I first started doing these studies, I couldn't get any subjects. Like I go to the docs and say, give me some subjects so I can show you what this does. The only people who would give me any help whatsoever would be rheumatologists, because they said, we can't do anything. This is the ladies with MS and lupus and all of these kind of autoimmune diseases, because they didn't know what they were back then. But anyhow, because they can't do anything for them. And autism, you can't do anything for them. There's no insurance code. What kind of insurance code can you use for? So this, there's other issues goes on here, but anyhow, I don't know why I got off on that subject. Bring me back home. I'm sorry.
Sleeping directly on the mat, or
sleeping directly on the mat. So what I tell everybody, if your health is compromised, your body's on fire, and you need to stop the pain. If you are experiencing pain, if you feel pain, that means you have inflammation, because you can't have pain in your body without inflammation. It's just inflammation comes first, and it's a message to the brain and to the body that, hey, I'm on fire, get me out of here. But we don't perceive it that way. It means I need a pill, But anyhow, so what I tell everybody is, if your health is compromised, forget about anything anybody's ever told you. Just put the mat on your bed, lay down, and go to sleep, and stay there and stay grounded until the pain goes away. And sometimes it's only 15 minutes. Sometimes it's 15 days, depending how old you are and how much you've abused yourself. But the body will return to normal. I've seen crippled up arthritic fingers all gnarled, eventually straighten out. I've seen it all. I'm totally convinced that nature knows what she's doing.
Absolutely.
That how it's and it's not. But anyhow, so and then once you get well and the pain's gone, then you can just take a nice thin sheet out of your closet and put it over the top of the mattress and sleep on it. And what happens as soon as you lay down on the sheet that's on the mat and the mat's grounded, then your body is perspiring constantly, 24/7. And you're going to create enough perspiration. You're going to take the humidity in the air and the perspiration that the body normally produces. You put a cover over you, you can feel the dampness. Okay, so that's enough conductivity for electrons to move and to ground you. And you can test this with a meter. And but you usually have to lay down on it in order for the meter to read, because you have to have that hydration build up. Only takes a few seconds or minutes. And then you got the comfort of that. But most people I know, by and large, a lot of them do both. But most people sleep directly on the mat. But that's because everybody out there, everybody has got health problems. Everybody that can be resolved with grounding to a large degree.
And now, hopefully, after listening to this, they'll know that.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
if you have severe health issues, lay directly on the mat. Once those have kind of dwindled down a little bit, then you can proceed to little sheet over there. Okay. Gotcha.
If pain comes back up, get back on the block. Yeah.
Simple. Okay. So let's talk about the blood. And this, I think we'll end it after this one. And
Okay.
this is probably the most important thing to me because I love my mother, and my mother was
Yep.
on blood pressure medication. And once I noticed how much of a benefit that this was having on me, I needed to purchase it for her right away. Like you said, you don't need to advertise because it's
Yeah.
so real that
Mhm.
it's just going to spread like a wildfire. So word of mouth is the best.
Yep.
And I wanted to ask you, since we're going to talk about the blood, would there be any contraindications for people to start this up? Because what I noticed was not only with my mother, but with another lady that I introduced this to, it actually reduced their blood pressure so much that if they were doing the grounding along with taking their medication, it would actually go too low.
Yes. That is the problem. Anybody who is on um, Coumadin, especially, or any of these blood thinners, um, and and then you start grounding. Well, first of all, let me tell you what grounding does. So as soon as you stand on the earth, the first thing that happens within minutes is your blood viscosity normalizes, meaning before your blood is thick and sticky, and it's hard to get in and out of the capillaries and oxygenate the tissue and so on. And so as soon as you ground the body, then the blood circulates about once a minute throughout the body. So if you're standing barefoot on the earth, your blood is moving through the body. So once a minute, it's going to be grounded. It's going to be in that area. But anyhow, what the first thing that happens is you increase the negative charge on red blood cells by about 300%. There is a peer-reviewed published study on the earthinginstitute.net that explains all of this. It was done by Dr. Sinatra and cardiologist and a handful of other docs. And so anyhow, the first thing that happens is the red blood cells absorb the free electrons from the earth, and you increase the negative surface. So there's more electrons on the surface of the red blood cell. Now, anytime you take two things that are negative and you push them together, they will repel each other. They can't stick together. If you don't have enough electrons, then they're going to share electrons, stick together, and that's what makes blood thick and sticky.
Mm-hmm.
So as soon as you get grounded within 15 minutes, and I always tell the women this, I said, I really should be selling this as a beauty products because you are going to look 10 years younger in 15 to 20 minutes. Mm-hmm. Because what happens when you normalize the blood viscosity, now the blood is thin like wine, and it can go in and out of the capillaries to oxygenate the tissues, and you start turning pink. Mm-hmm. And your demeanor changes because you're no longer mad and stressed or in pain or whatever, and you start to get happy because you feel better. And but anyhow, the number one thing that grounding does is it normalizes blood viscosity. Like the animals, your blood is thin like wine, like red wine, rather than sticky like ketchup. So most of these inflammation-related health disorders are because the blood is thick and sticky. The blood cells can't get in and out of the capillaries sufficient to oxygenate the tissue. Mm-hmm. And then the inflammation builds up. It's like you mentioned something earlier about you felt, congestion and whatever when you got grounded. Well, what that was is as soon as you normalize your blood viscosity, then the oxygen, you can increase the oxygen in the tissue, and then the spirochetes and some of the little critters that live in the ends of in the end of the capillaries. Now the blood can get in there and oxygenate the tissue and kill them. So you have a die-off.
Okay.
It's like you have a flu or a cold or whatever. You eventually have a die-off and you feel like horrible for a day or two or three, but that all disappears and goes away. So, but that's just the immune system creating a die-off and normalizing your health. And a lot of people, they feel that little tingling area come up. You'll only feel that tingling until you equalize with the earth. soon as you have the same amount of electrons as the Earth, that goes away. So that you're just charging up like a little battery. You're trickle charging. And but the most important thing that we discovered was that grounding normalizes blood viscosity. But if you are taking blood thinners, then you do have to make a decision in life. I'm going to stay with the blood thinners because that way I can control it and just stay with it. But if you're going to start grounding, then you need to go ahead and start grounding. But then as soon as you feel the benefits of your normal blood thinning, then you have to make a decision. Do I want to be grounded or do I want to be whatever? You can't mix the two. But you need to know that, and the Earthing book talks about all this. The Earthing Institute has papers on it, plenty of information out there. It's like they tell you when you go on blood thinning, you can't eat greens. You can't eat green vegetable. I mean, you can't eat spinach because it'll thin the blood too much. You can't eat good food because it'll thin the blood too much. So it's similar. You're eating electrons, whether you're getting them through the feet or whether you're eating them with vegetables or salads or whatever. It's all related here, So you have to make decisions. Do I want to give up my salads and take my blood thinners? Do I want to get grounded, or do I want to take my blood? So it's just the way it is. Some people, you may be trapped forever unless you can find a way to balance this or do whatever. But again, this is nature. This is who we are. And we just accidentally disconnected, and now our bodies are on fire, and now we're running around looking for every solution in the world to fix it. There's only one solution. It's nature.
No, absolutely. I think it's really important to mention the die-off because I could imagine that some people that are introduced to this, if they experience something and they feel horrible right away, then like, oh, no, I don't want to touch that. That's bad. So I would say just stick with it. Trust that your body and Mother Nature has some type of logic to it that is probably a lot smarter than we are. And you may get to that crossroads and you're going to have to decide. You want health and freedom, or do you want to kind of just being strung along and never really have answers to any of your health issues?
Just in closing on this, the number one issue here is it's about the immune system. When you are ungrounded, your immune system is no longer able to function as normal, because now when it has an oxidative burst, those free radicals create inflammation. When you're grounded, that does not occur. So the problem is that if you go ungrounded for too long, then this inflammation builds, and then your immune system spends all of its time fighting the inflammation, trying to repair the problems that it itself is creating because it is no longer grounded. It doesn't know it's no longer grounded. And so this is about the immune system. If you take care of your immune system, you're going to have health. You cannot not have health. You see it in nature everywhere.
It's your body's screaming at you that something's wrong. We just we want answers, but we get them from the wrong places instead of going in and actually listening, pausing. Actually, I lied. If you have time, I want to ask about hypothyroidism, because I know that was mentioned also towards the end of the book, and that would potentially be an issue if people were taking hypothyroid medication and then they started grounding themselves. They may actually become hyperthyroid.
But people who are on thyroid meds, they kind of know, they have to be careful, but they know when it changes. But the first thing, we were at the University of California, Irvine, I believe, and we were doing some studies in the basement there, and one of the gals who was working for one of the researchers she came in after a couple of weeks because we had given her some ground and stuff, and she says, could this be affecting my thyroid? And I said, I don't really know. And so we started monitoring her, and then we realized that her thyroid normalized in a matter of weeks. And so she had to start reducing the thyroid meds. So it's, you have, I mean, if you're on drugs or there to mimic or to try to do something similar to what the body is doing because the body's not functioning properly. So they add something to the body, take something away from the body in order to compensate to normalize, stabilize the body. And so, it's not just thyroid. It's not just blood thinners. It's everything. Your body, it's like I tell this story all the time. When I was young, I remember because my uncle used to own the veterinary supply, wholesale supply of Montana, and the drug salesmen would come around, or the people who sold vitamins, and they were always trying to get the veterinary supply houses to start selling supplements to the farmers, or for the cattle and for whatever. And the problem was, and I heard him say it, I didn't understand it. He said, well, we don't dare feed them to the cows because we're going to make the cows sick. They're going to have diarrhea. They're going to have all this kind of stuff. And then we have to, but they're trying to create an industry for the vets, but the body can synthesize so many of the vitamins and so many of the nutrients that it needs all by itself. Some it can't. Vitamin C it can't, and so on. So what you need is just a good, well-rounded diet. And then if you want to buff up and do things, proteins and whatever, but still, you always have to know that your body got here from millions, hundreds of millions of years. Your body got here. How did it get here without any of those things? Because all these modern things only came along in the last few years. And, it's not that anything is bad and all that. It's just look at nature first, start there. Mm-hmm. Eat fresh food, eat raw food when you can. Eat what nature give you in the way it give it to you, because that's where your nutrition is. Mm-hmm. You don't need 3,000 calories a day. You need X amount of nutrition a day. But you need to look at it because we're eating dead food, not enough electrons. The body wants electrons.
So body wants electrons. By cooking food, then, are we getting less electrons? You mentioned
yeah. If you take a live piece of food,
it's fresher.
It's fresh, and it tastes good, and it's full of energy. And when I say electrons, I'm talking about energy. Energy is, if it's got an E in it, it's electrons. Okay, so what you're eating, energy. So you want to eat as healthy a food as you can, and the most healthy food is live food, or food that is not damaged any more than it has to be in cooking. You have to eat cooked food because of the way we live today and the way we get our food. But just pay attention. Live food is where that's life. Mm-hmm. I don't know how to say that. I take some supplements. I do this, I do that. I take protein, I do whatever. Because I can't do it with my normal diet because I travel or I do this or whatever. But given the opportunity, I want some fresh food. I want some fresh berries. I want some fresh fruit. That's where my energy comes from.
It makes sense. I think you just open up like Pandora's box in my mind. I don't know if you saw it over the camera, but I'm just like, hold up, this makes a lot of sense right now. So
yeah, it's all about electrons, whether it's the earth, the sun, or a food. It's all electrons. It's a big circle. It's a big cycle.
Nice. Awesome. Well, Clint, I want to thank you so much for your time. And you mentioned getting out in nature and just sitting. And I can fully agree with that because I've gone on my solo road trips where I kind of needed to find myself. I've gone out on these long trails just solo. And by the way, when I sleep somewhere, I did take a grounding mat because I knew how big of a difference it would make if I was sprinting out on these hills. I need some recovery.
Yep.
I take that thing everywhere. I do not miss a single night.
Right.
Get out in nature. That's really what I believe that we need to get back to
Yeah.
human nature, back to who we were before, what we always had.
Yeah.
And would you offer just one more piece of advice for anyone? Because I really like that you kind of went the minimalist route and how you got rid of all of
Yeah.
the pieces and things that really didn't seem to suit you anymore. Because when I sat out in nature on these trails, that's really when I felt rich. It's like an inherited wealth. I don't need any of these material possessions.
No.
What makes me
No.
happy is just being.
Yeah. I'm short on words sometimes when it comes to trying to explain certain type things, but when you're in nature, you're a part of something infinitely large. It's big, it's powerful, but there's honesty, there's truth, there's simplicity, there's love. I mean, there's things there that as soon as you get ungrounded, then you lose that connection, and you're just overstimulated and all these things, and you're lost. But for some reason, I mean, you touch the earth, just there's a consciousness there. There's a truth there. There's a power that is it just is, and it's who we are. We are a part of that, and it is a part of us, and we just have to reconnect with it. And you don't have to think about it. You just have to experience it. It's powerful.
Love it, man. Nailed. I completely agree.
Yeah.
So where can people find you and your products? Because I will leave all of this in the show notes, Clint.
The earthinginstitute.net is where all of the research studies are. There's hundreds of posted papers there now. You can find anything. And if you have any questions or unique or specific things, you can write, and we always answer them. Earthing.com is a company that produces the sleep mats, the desk mats, and the patch kits, and just the products. And we try to keep the prices as low as we can, but I guarantee you they are the best quality products on the market. And I think by and large, they're the most affordable products on the market. So, but anyhow, earthing.com, and I'm everywhere. You can find me on anything, ask me a question. I always show up.
Awesome. Well, again, thank you so much for your time, brother. I love what you're doing.
All right. Well,
Feel like you're truly living out your purpose right now.
and I thank you for having me on your show and being able to share with your audience.
Of course.
Hopefully they go home, take their shoes off, and experience this.
Well, if they've been following me for long enough, then they know exactly how I feel about that. I'm very adamant about it. So
yeah, cool. Very good.
And off the record, I'm not going to put this in the podcast, but are you affiliated with Ultimate Longevity by any chance, or is it just earthing.com? Because I was a little bit confused. I thought Ultimate Longevity was part of your products too.
All of the Ultimate Longevity, as far as I know, are products that we sell to them, private label to them. I let them do that because they do a pretty good business. And again, it's not earthing.com is who who it's the money from earthing.com that makes earthing available to the Institute and to the world. So I promote and support earthing.com. But anybody else, we have distributors almost in every country, and they're all growing, and earthing is just growing. It's just, I mean, it's unbelievable how fast it's grown in the last 2 years, 3 years. And it's just, but yeah, there's ultimate longevity is they're the same products. I don't know anything about their prices.
Okay. No, I just want some clarity on there. And I'm going to forward everyone towards earthing.com now that I actually am confident about it. Because I see your like a about page kind of everywhere. Like you said.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. Yeah. And we have a lot of affiliates, people who promote the product, not necessarily promote the product, but need access, and they educate people. So if even yourself, if you're interested, you can get a 20% commission off the products. You don't have to handle them, you don't have to ship them, you don't have to inventory. It's just referrals. And the yoga studios and gyms, lots of people do that because it takes time to go teach people, and your time is all you got, And but anyhow, that's a good way. You can't make. It's hard to make 20% profit on anything anyway if you have to handle it. So it's really a better way for everybody.
No, I will definitely take you up on that offer. I'll follow through.
Yeah.
I just wanted to make sure. And I would definitely like to support you because you're the one that can handle all this. So
yeah, you bet. I appreciate that.
Awesome. Thank you, Clint. God bless, brother.
Same to you. God bless. We'll talk to you later.
Have a great night.
Keep me posted.
I will.